Tenant and Common Property Type Comparisons by Ken Yamaguchi. TIC properties are generally available in the 5 major types of real estate investments: residential, retail, office, industrial, and land. This is a brief overview and comparison of the 4 most prevalent income property types: residential, retail, office, and industrial. Class and markets. When comparing tenants and common property types, it's important to consider the classification of the property. Properties are classified as A, B, or C for both build quality and location. The market classification in which the property is located is also important. The market will likely be a primary market, a secondary market, or a tertiary market. Income properties are like bonds. The higher the quality, the lower the return. For example, U.S. Treasuries pay the least, while corporate junk bonds pay the most. A very large, newer Class A property in a primary market will be the safest property overall, but it will have a relatively lower cash-on-cash return. A small, older Class C property in a tertiary market will be the riskiest property overall, but it will have a relatively higher cash-on-cash return. Property size. The larger the property, the safer it is, mainly due to the reduction of a key risk, vacancy risk. The greater the number of tenants, the lower is the risk of vacancy. The smaller the number of tenants, the higher is the risk of vacancy. For example, with one tenant, vacancy risk is highest, since that property is either 100% occupied or 100% vacant. Thus, all things being equal, a 400-unit multifamily property has less vacancy risk than a 40-unit apartment complex, which has less risk than a single-tenant condominium or single-family residence. The same idea holds true for retail properties. All things being equal, a standalone retail store is riskier than a multi-tenant retail center, which is riskier than a credit tenant or credit anchor tenant retail center. Quality of tenants. Tenant quality is based primarily on the financial ability of the tenant to pay the rent. The highest quality of tenant has the lowest risk of vacancy. The lowest quality of tenant has the highest risk of vacancy. For residential tenants, the quality is reflected in FICO scores and the background check. Retail tenants are separated into credit and non-credit. Credit tenants have an actual corporate or company rating by the credit ratings agencies such as Standard & Poor's or Moody's. Also, high-quality tenants require less management time, trouble, and expense, while low-quality tenants require more time, trouble, and expense. Vacancy loss and tenant improvement costs. A concern of any property owner is the cost or loss due to vacancy and the cost required to re-lease the space. Multifamily properties generally have the lowest costs, since all that is required once a unit is vacant is to clean and repair it to make it ready for a new tenant. While competing properties may be available, concessions or incentives can be offered to incentivize the tenant to sign the lease. Residential tenants tend to stay in place for a number of years, even with annual rent increases. Shorter-term leases, such as 12 and 24 months, enable the owners to raise the rents, increasing the cash-on-cash return. Light industrial and light assembly space is probably the next more expensive space to re-tenant due to the particular needs of different businesses. Like residential, once businesses take occupancy, they tend to stay in place. Light industrial parks tend to offer uniform unit sizes, and the spaces tend to be usually to a large variety of tenants. Leases tend to be longer than residential, such as 3 to 5 years. Retail space is probably the next more expensive space to re-tenant due to the particular needs of different businesses. But retail tenants tend to stay in place a very long time because in retail sales, location and the customer's familiarity is extremely important. Retailers are loath to move their place of business for fear of loss of business. Retailers have great loyalty to a location once their business is established and thriving. Depending on the tenant, retail leases typically range from 5 to 25 years and usually provide inflation-related increases in rent. Office properties probably have the highest risk of vacancy and can be the most expensive to re-tenant since office tenants do not depend on retail traffic to drive their business. Office tenants can move at any time with no appreciable loss of business. Competing office space is often plentiful, and owners of competing properties can successfully incentivize tenants to move from other buildings. Also, once vacant, office owners face high tenant improvement (TI) costs to entice new tenants to the available space. Partitions, walls, flooring, ceilings, and lighting often must be completely remodeled. Office leases are typically 5 years. Summary. Tenants in common (TIC) properties are available in the most common property types, in all the different classes, and in all the different markets across the USA. It can be challenging to rationally compare residential to retail, to office, to industrial in all the different classes, markets, and sizes. Contact an expert, discuss your income objectives, risk tolerances, property type, and regional preferences, and compare the attributes of the particular properties available. Because of the common nature of most tenants in common properties and the tight spread between the returns provided by all the various property and quality types, I believe that safety is of primary importance. Put another way, return of equity is as important as return on equity. Also, the quality of the income is as important as the quantity of income. The largest, highest quality properties in the best markets will have the best credit tenants, and these properties tend to produce a higher quality of monthly income. I also believe that superior size, quality, and safety generally have higher upside profit potential upon final disposition. Finally, experience has shown that diversification for the sake of diversification is not always the safest strategy, especially when a clearly superior or safer property is among the choices available.